Welcome to the Art of Growth and our panel season on Enneagram stances and attachment styles. This is the Type 2 panel. Before we get started, if you'd like to process the Enneagram and your growth journey with others on the path, consider joining the Art of Growth community. This is the best place to meet up with other Art of Growth listeners as we support each other in our becoming. You can join today at www.theartofgrowth.org. Theartofgrowth.org is also the place to take a free Enneagram test, a free Enneagram Instincts variant test, or to reach out to us for individual coaching or organizational coaching and consulting. There you can reach out to Joel Hubbard or me, Jim Zartman. In this podcast series, we build on the work we've done in other panel seasons on Enneagram type and instincts. All right, here we go.
Well, welcome everyone to the Type 2 Stances and Attachment Styles podcast. I am absolutely excited to have each of you here. We are going to be diving in and asking you some questions about your stances and attachment styles. But before we do, let's get to know you a little bit. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
I am Heather, and I'm from Pennsylvania.
I'm Stephanie, and I live in Connecticut.
I'm Madeline, and I live in Texas.
My name's Dave, and I live in California.
All over the country. This is great.
Coast to coast.
Right. Yeah, coast to coast. This is awesome. So let's begin by looking at the stances and attachment styles. Both are addressing the need that all of us have for connection, for intimacy. And so the stances and attachment styles describes how we do that. So in what ways do we get our needs met as it relates to those who are closest to us? And so we'll begin with the stances. And of course, as a reminder, we have those three type of stances. We've got the at or against, we've got the toward, and we have the away. So let's begin by you sharing which one do you start with, and does the context matter?
I'm a social 2. Most of the time I have a toward stance, but I also realize that as a social 2, I'm always scanning the room and I'm seeing what's going on. If I come up with, in like a work situation or like a boardroom type of situation with someone, a very at stance, I will just withdraw. I just get very quiet. So that, as I think about it, really can depend on the circumstance and the quality of the relationship that is there.
So that's really interesting because I am the sexual subtype. And I was just thinking about how, for me, it kind of depends on the context. Like, I look at connection and comfortability. So if I feel like I'll connect more with a person by matching their stance, then I will kind of shift into that stance and mirror it. But then also, I feel like I'm subconsciously thinking, okay, how comfortable am I with this person? I prefer to be more aggressive. If they will accept that, then I would rather sort of like shift into the aggressive stance. But if not, then I can just stay. So it's like I'm weighing rejection, and then are we also going to connect more? So it's interesting.
Yeah, I suspected as much with the sexual instinct. It seems to have that consistency of being something that can call up a little bit more of that againstness. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And we were discussing with one of the panels last night about how even toward will take on a different look based on, your type. So, because it sounds like you use words like, I'm going to match them, but it's still like looking for that connection and comfortability. So it still sounds like it's toward, but in order to move toward, I might adapt myself is what it sounded like to me. Does that resonate with you, Madeline?
Yes, that's correct. Except preparing for this podcast, I definitely realized I struggle with away and withdrawn. And so I can't always pull that one out of my pocket, but I'm working on it.
What has to happen for you to get there?
I would say pausing and forcing myself hardcore to do it. It's very difficult for me to do the away stance. So that's part of my growth path as a sexual too.
That makes a lot of sense. And that is fairly consistent. What's your second in the stacking of your instincts? Let's talk about that for a second.
Social would be my second.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so that's very consistent when we have those two paired up together. It really puts us into that, very much into that toward.
Mhm.
Or if you're in the assertive, the against stance, you would be against and toward. So, but yeah, we were having this conversation and we were talking with type 8s who have the second as toward, and there's social 8s who have that, a lot of that. But we were saying, like, even if there's a mixture between the two, most people around you would experience you very much still with that like againstness inside you. Whereas a 2, even when you're matching somebody, say in the against stance, it would still probably have more of that toward feel to it, with a bit more intensity for sure. Would you say that would be true as well? Like people wouldn't be mistaking you as an 8. They wouldn't go, oh, is she an 8?
Yeah, most of the time. But I would say that there are people that are closer to me that they do get more of that aggressive stance and that against, because I feel like they'll accept it. So more of that comes out. But I would say with the general public, it's definitely in a very toward dutiful flavor.
Yeah. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, and please don't let me lead you in a direction. I thank you for saying that, because that helps also to, color in a little bit more the fullness too. So yeah, appreciate that.
I just add something because I was kind of picking up on what you were saying early, Madeline. I actually call it vibing with people. And I think as a social 2, I often kind of see how is their stance. And so I will try to match it as well in a way to make them comfortable. But sometimes then I'm left with, where am I? Do you know what I mean? So, if someone's backing off, I will back off, and if someone's up here, I'll come up here. And so it sometimes makes me think, well, what is the true way that I am towards people? And again, I think I do go towards, but I'm always testing the water, and I seem to be very sensitive to that. And I wonder if that's always good. I don't know.
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit, explore on that, but I want to hear from you, Dave and Steph.
I'm a social 2, and I definitely have a towards. I've been calling it with. I'm not sure why, but it just feels like I just want to be with people, and I want to be on the same side as you. And so I've been using the term with, but I like dutiful also. I think, Joel, you had mentioned dutiful a little bit ago, but you guys are talking about matching the stance. I think it's so interesting because I can match the stance, but if it's an aggressive stance, I get like hands sweaty. I can taste the adrenaline and I start to shake if I'm matching that. And it makes me really, going to attachment style, makes me really anxious. And so this whole anxiety wave comes over me. And then something that I meant to be nice comes out such a jerk, and it was like, oh, all that adrenaline and that rush of like anxiety and aggression. It's hard for me to control sometimes.
Yeah. Stephanie.
I'm a self-pres too. I lead with self-pres, and then my social is my second. I'll say I aim to be toward. It's been interesting thinking about this, because if I feel threatened or if I feel like my boundaries are being crossed, it will definitely become an at or an against. And I can get aggressive. I can get very firm, loud. I'm also Italian, so that doesn't help, but it's not pretty. And I don't love it. I will say that also when I've reached pure exhaustion and the at and against isn't getting me what I need, then I go into a way, and I just end up feeling like all I want is to be alone. I just want to be alone. I want to get away. I want to not have to be beholden to anybody's expectations or whatever. And I just tend to, like, that's what I need, in order to come back to that toward, or the with, if you will, I think is when I have that away, when I actually take the away time to reset and neutralize. But when I'm kind of in my like just normal vibing, Heather, like you're saying, just vibing and getting along and feeling good and having a good day, I feel like it's mostly toward, or I guess, I don't know if we're using that word with, but yeah.
It's interesting to hear that for a few of you, at least. I'm curious if I'm hearing all of you correctly, that the away stance is actually your third, not for any of you, it's not your second, which is interesting because I've talked to other type 2s who say it is their second. Like it goes from toward and then they move away. But then they're quick to say that in the away, if they admit the truth about themselves, it's sort of like a please come find me. and please come toward me. So they were not even sure if it really was away in that sense. It's like, what is that part of the two, rather than a stance? You can't answer their question because they're not here. But do you find that the away then for you is really different? How would you define then the kind of what happens when you move to the away?
So I'll admit I'm fully preparing for a bit of away time. And I have admitted to my circle that I need to be away. I need some time. I feel like most people who's away is their initial knee jerk, like my 5 partner. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to go away and I'll come back when I'm ready. Me, I'm like, I'm taking time. I'm going away. Give me space. Maybe check in on me and make sure I'm okay.
Yeah.
So maybe, I think it is maybe a little bit different in that sense, at least for me, what I've noticed in other people who away is a little more natural.
I was thinking that, and this sounds so juvenile, but we're all trying to grow, right? It's easier for me to be away when it's my idea and it's my choice, but it's when it's being asked of me and it feels like that rejection that it's difficult. And that's probably some control there as well. But if it's my choice or I'm expecting this away time, or it's like this scheduled solitude, if I can really frame it as this is a healthy thing for me and I'm choosing this for myself, then it helps me be in that away time. But definitely, like I was reading about the attachment styles, I do feel like if I do have to go to away time, I'm still thinking about relationships, and it is that I'm so ready for this to be done. Like, if you want to check in on me, great. Like, I'm still very present in my relationships and my away time. And so that can be healthy and that can be unhealthy.
It almost is a break from that face-to-face relationship so that I can process what's going on and think about the relationship and think about what my next steps are or what I'm going to do next. I kind of have seen away or withdrawn as a tool in my life because I recharge my batteries by being away sometimes and being with people other times. And so being able to just be away or withdraw has been very helpful and good for me. But at the same time, if I come across aggressive, I have this, I just need to get away. And I go into that kind of avoidance type of away. And that's not real healthy. And that's not a good place to be. But
yeah.
So I've seen the away for me both working in a positive aspect and a negative aspect. So for me, in general, the away is my third way of relating in connection. And it's generally done after I'm trying to come towards someone and I can't connect. Then I'll go to aggressive, like, no, I want you to be with me, or I want to have a relationship, whatever. That didn't work. So the away becomes like a hurt. I'm going to take my ball and go home. So those two strategies didn't work. So now I'm going to withdraw my love and affection and see how you feel now, in a sense. And, it sounds terrible to say, but I recognized that once with my daughter when she came home from college. All the things have been done and nothing works. So that's where I go. Now, however, what I'm trying to do is use it in a way that gives the other person space. And so I live with 4 withdrawers. I have 3 9s and a 5, and I'm a social 2. So there you go. And so understanding where they're coming from, sometimes my withdrawing is a way to just give them the space to, again, that safety so that they can then connect. And so now I'm using it as like more of an effective tool versus I'm going to take my ball and go home because nothing else worked. So I'm trying to use the away energy that way.
You're describing very well what we're going to get to, which is talking about the with stance that Jim and I have coined that phrase, which is precisely what you're talking about there. But before we dive into that, I do want to ask a little bit more about, since we're talking a bit about attachment styles. So once again, what's your attachment style? I appreciate some of you have already said, one of you already said, like, I start, I think it was you, Dave, I start. Sometimes I'll even go to that, like, avoidant, right? So, but what is your predominant attachment style?
so I had taken the test and I was surprised that I was mostly normal.
Secure attached?
Yeah. Secure. Yeah. So 45% secure. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just feel so anxious all the time. But it's because I overthink everything, and every relationship I'm overthinking, and it brings anxiety at times. But anxious was like 30%, avoidance was like 20%. So I was very surprised. I was like, oh, okay, I can be all right with that.
Well, all you twos are always surprised at how like normal or healthy you actually are. It's like, really? So yeah. So the rest of us like you, but it's hard for you to like you sometimes, right?
That's true.
So like, look, that is wonderful, and secure attachment is the direction we want to go in. And just as a little explanation there, so secure attachment, according to the theory, is that you know how to ask for what you need without demanding it. And you also have the capacity to receive when it does come to you, but you're also able to give also in return, but that's easy for you type twos. So that's the idea there. And it's not, and everybody thinks that secure attachment means you have no problems relationally. Like everything is perfect, and it's not. It's a process by which you're moving through the difficulties and the challenges. And so congratulations to you. I mean, that's wonderful. But again, it's helpful to also understand, like, what do you revert to if you're really in a place of stress? Is you might revert to that anxious.
Absolutely.
No.
I tested as secure as well and had the same exact response. So I feel seen. But next, I think secure was like 40% or something. And then I had disorganized next and anxious, ambivalent third. And those were pretty tied. And I felt like that made sense because I would say I start as secure, and friends and family, I think I operate in that. But maybe part of me being the sexual subtype, very focused on those intimate relationships, I do shift more into the disorganized and the anxious and romantic relationships, but not right off the bat. When I sort of looked at my past, I think I look at people as safe and unsafe. If I am trust you and you're safe, I operate securely. But once I feel like that person is unsafe or they're maybe acting in a non-secure attachment style, I shift into it. And it's not something that I feel like I have a lot of control over, but I definitely have noticed that pattern in my life. And so I think it's, do I trust them? And if I don't trust them, then it kind of just puts me off balance into the disorganized and the ambivalent. I also related a bunch to you said the like, come find me, but also pushing away, that it talked about for the disorganized and ambivalent. I definitely experienced that with my caregivers. And I mean, even recently, someone pointed that out to me. And so that's something that I'm working with. But I think it's because as the sexual subtype, I want intimacy so bad. I want that connection. And so it's almost like sticking my hand out, like I want the connection, but I'm like scared I'm going to get hurt, but I just keep doing it. And so that's how it shows up for me.
Yeah. I appreciate you being this vulnerable about that, because the disorganized one is the one that most of us don't want to be in. When I read it, I was like, oh, I've been there. And I've been there like many times. And so there is that lack of strategy. So that for that category, it's like the lack of strategy about how you go about getting your needs met in connection with people. And so, I appreciate you sharing that.
So I did score very high on secure. And for that, I give credit to my parents. Again, I know that this is upbringing. So I had a very good childhood. So I'm thankful for that. And when I look at them all, being able to ask for, receive, and give, both independence and intimacy, really good at receiving and giving, like not a problem. But asking is still an incredible growth edge for me. The way I generally ask actually is an at way, like, you're not doing this. I've kept it inside and it bubbles up because, like, am I worth, asking for something? You're worse off than I am, so let me take care of you. And so I know that for me, it's really important. And I think it has affected those also who I'm really close with. It's not fair to them either. I need to be able to say, this is what I need. And I know that they want that. It's just, it's still very difficult for me. And that's something I'm working on. So.
So what's your default, or what happens when you're not in the secure place for you? What is the attack?
So I think the next then was anxious ambivalent, then withdrawing. And actually, I would have thought that the withdrawing and the anxious ambivalent might have been switched a little bit, because I'd be like, I want to go away. But I can get very aggressive if I feel like no one knows what I need. But I'm like, but I didn't tell anybody, so it's,
Yeah.
So I see the conundrum. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, it's being able to, my big thing is I scan everybody else. How are they? And what are they feeling? But turning that antenna towards me, what am I feeling has been difficult. And it's something I'm still working on. So then first is recognizing it, but then saying, I have the ability to say it in a way that is winsome and will bring somebody towards me, and not using as a missile, like, you're not doing this for me.
Yeah.
And so that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It is much easier to be, when you're asking for something, to send it as a missile than it is.
Totally.
Right? Because, oh man, how vulnerable we are when we say, here's my need.
And that's the key right there, is vulnerability, And so like, what's so hard about that? And these are people that I love and trust. And so, I think about that sometimes. It's like, why is it so hard? And, for me, again, I guess this, source of pride is a 2. I'm okay. You're not. I don't have needs. But again, that's a crock of baloney.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you were raised well by good parents, loving
I was.
parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is the thing that we keep saying, is that we're not just products of our environment. We have these sort of hard wirings that are part of our type. And so there you have it. But thank you for sharing that, Stephanie.
I will tell you, I do know anxious has always been my leading style. And that became very aware to me a few years ago when I actually started looking into attachment styles before I learned about the Enneagram. But I can easily say that it is very hard for me in new relationships, romantic relationships mostly, to trust people and trust the person, just based on not only my history with my family, but also my history in relationships and patterns with people, that the slightest thing, even sometimes, with somebody who is trustworthy, it's like, it's almost unbelievable that I could trust someone. And so I have in the past felt, this is hard to admit, like I need to go digging, right? Something's got to be wrong. Got to go looking for something, because something's happening. They're lying about something. Something's about to burst somewhere. So, and Heather, I think you were kind of saying something about this too. If I'm doing my best to kind of keep things calm and secure, but I'm not being met, the next thing is to get anxious and to come and try to grasp and hold and control it. And here, let me just help us figure this out and make this work. And I laugh about it, but it's very true and very real right now for me. So it's harder for me to get into that secure place, which is what I know I'm working on the most right now, is trying to give people the space without it meaning that there's danger.
Excellent. This is practice. So again, we're not arriving at a stage of security by simply arriving there. It's like, okay, I got to practice these things that are difficult and that are very unsatisfying to us sometimes. So yeah.
I think that's the hardest part, right? So the unsatisfying part, I would love to circle back to that in a little bit here after we hear from David.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it. I think I feel most secure when it's within my rhythms of life, and I'm fairly organized. So when things are where they should be, when relationships are where they should be, I feel most secure. And the closer I feel in a relationship, the more I feel secure as well. But that anxiety comes on and really just kind of throws me off my rhythm when there's things that are undone, when things are unsaid. Like the other day, my wife was going off to work and she was clearly mad at me for something. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, I have to go to work. And I was like, oh man, that's about the worst thing you could do at this time. I was anxious all day long.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
because, she works, for the city, and it's not like I can call her and hash it out and figure out what did I do? Like, I had no idea. And so when things are left unsaid or unspoken, I just have this disjointed feeling. And it's with all my relationships all at the same time, so that's the hard part.
We did see a lot of this anxious come up for a lot of you. What does that feel like? What are you experiencing in that moment? Like, what are you anxious about? I think that's the thing, is if someone is on the outside of this, they're not a 2, they can't understand this. So I'm looking from the outside in, like, what are you worried about?
They don't love me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to lose this person. I am not lovable. Those are the thoughts.
I'm not good enough.
Yeah. It feels like the world is falling apart sometimes. And physically, for me anyway, it's like all of the nerve endings on the front side of my body, like up my shins and my kneecaps and my upper like chest and my arms, and I can just feel it all like on fire. And the brain starts spinning out of control. Well, if I would have said this, or maybe I said that, or maybe I should have done this, or I messed this up, all of that.
Yeah, I was thinking about earlier how much this feeling, like how much I feel it in my body, which I know we aren't always very grounded in our bodies as 2s, but when it comes to when I'm in this anxious space, it's like, are they not accepting me? And if they're not accepting me, are they leaving me? It all kind of feels melded together in those moments, but it really is like it takes over my mind and my body where I can hardly focus on anything else. And so, and I've noticed, I think that's where sometimes I shift into that 8 space, because my body feels so unsafe and I'm so freaked out. It's like, okay, I've got to fix this because I have a life to live and a job to do. And so, yeah, it's very felt in the body though. It's like, it's paralyzing and it's not a fun feeling. And it does feel very similar to being in the away stance. Yeah, it's sort of that same feeling to me.
Yeah, I work very hard to not let a rift become a rupture, right? So if there's any, rift happening, I don't want it to rupture no matter the relationship. And so it's been interesting that part of my growth in like the last couple of years has been with one relationship that had been very close, realizing that a rupture had to occur because that was healthy. And everything in my being was like, no, this goes against my grain, And so part of it was like, sometimes there will be a disconnection forever with somebody, and maybe that's okay. But for me, it was always like, I have to always be in connection, always healthy communication, always healthy things, or else it feels very unsafe. I get the feeling, for me, it's like a pit in my stomach until it's resolved. And so I think that actually I took some things on the chin that I shouldn't have in order to maintain that relationship. And now I'm growing into saying, like, you know what, sometimes I need to stand my ground. And that's where I would use my healthy 8 energy to say, no, that's not okay. And I'm not going to placate you or apologize needlessly for something. And if you can't handle it, oh, well. And that is like really scary for me to say, and is very difficult, but I'm growing into that. So.
Wow. Thank you. That's wow.
Yeah.
Cracking. I'm learning. I'm feeling it. This is good. Wow. Because there was like an energy shift as you all were talking about that. There was a lot of intensity for all of you as you described this experience for you. It was the other stuff you were able to kind of, I don't know, be more objective or stand at a distance and witness yourself. But when we started talking about this, like all of you were like all the way in, like you were visualizing these experiences. So these are very visceral for all of you is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Even the language you use, there's very descriptive language about what this feels like.
It's suffering. Like, and it sounds like a very over dramatic word, but it was funny. I remember once too, it was so cute. I was driving with my husband somewhere and it was about a little something different, but like one of our kids wasn't doing well. And I was saying, but Kevin, does it hurt you? And he's like, of course it hurts me. I'm like, but no, does it hurt you? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, no, it doesn't. You know what I mean? I think sometimes for me as a two, and maybe you guys, like it, we just feel it so deeply. And I think he had no idea what I was talking about.
Well, and there's something about and I'm noticing the sort of dichotomy that exists between your external referencing. I mean, you're looking outward at other people and trying to read people. But at the same time, when you're in that space of anxiety, the attention is all inward. It's all on like, I must be the reason for why this thing is falling apart. I must be the reason why there's a problem in our relationship. And it completely like, you lose any sense of the other person having their own feelings or experience around that's separated from you. And that makes a lot of sense given that the twos have that capacity of going into the sort of unboundaried heart world, because heart space is unboundaried, right? It can feel what other people are feeling. You're in their world, they're in your world. And it has a tremendously beautiful and very impactful strength to it. But when you're in that anxious space, it's like you lose all objectivity in that space. And it becomes about, like you're bad and there's clearly something wrong with you.
I will say I do feel like I am being handed and like hit over the head right now with this exact lesson of learning to get out of that, because I've been met by 3 different people over the last couple of weeks unfairly and instinctually. With the one I'm closest to, it's always been stuck. I get stuck in that heart space that we're just talking about of it's my fault. What did I do? What can I do? How can I fix this? Another one, it was, the second person, which happens to be my dad. It's this, I know I don't deserve that, but I still want to fix this. I still feel like it's my fault, but I don't deserve that. And the third one, which was actually it's very fresh. It was last night. It's my best friend's husband, and coming really, really hard at me about being human and just being tired and not being able to show up for them and in the way that they need me to. And me saying, like, I'm raising my flag, guys. I'm flat out right now in life and I need to take care of me. And I cannot show up for you the way that you need me to right now. I'm really sorry. I love you. It has nothing to do with my love for you. Not okay by him at all. Like absolutely not acceptable. But as he was screaming at me, I was able to sit there and hear it and listen and be like, wow, he is hurting so hard. And this has nothing to do with me. I did not do this.
Wow.
My human actions are not actually needing to be forgiven. I can see that for once.
Wow.
It's wild. It was I'm still like buzzing from being able to feel so clear on that.
Yeah.
Remarkable. It's, you guys know me, that's not, it's like new for me. That's a new space.
Wow. That really happened. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm really
yeah.
It's so good.
It's hard, right? It's hard stuff. It's tough.
It is hard.
So I'm celebrating that in you. So that's growth. And those things happen. And again, you wish you could like snap your fingers and transform, and that kind of level of transformation happens, but it just seems to happen on its own. It's like all of a sudden one day something shifts internally, but I don't think you can just wait for it. I think, again, you've been doing some of the work, you've been doing a lot of the work, and then the practices. So that's yielding some fruit. Let's talk about the with stance and how we grow. So we're calling it the with stance as the 4th option that we have. We have, again, the against, the toward, and the away. And all 3 stances, every one of us has one that's a favorite. It's the one we go to. It's the strategy we use. Most of the time, it's unconscious. We're just going through it and we're doing it. And it's a way to get our needs met, but it's not at the conscious level. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then there's the second one that we go to usually fairly quickly, and leaving the third one out or until everything else stops working. And then we go to that. The sort of growth that we have through the stances is the capacity to actually see ourselves in the stance. So you start to see yourself in the toward. Oh, I'm doing this. It's that dutiful kind of thing. It's like I'm doing this in order to get this in return. And that's huge. That's a massive step towards growth. And then there's the ability to notice which ones are there to protect you. So which stances are you using to protect you? So in some cases, the away stance for you twos, the against stance, really important, because sometimes you have to go, okay, that's enough. I'm backing out. And that's wise, right? That's the protective nature of it. Sometimes it's used to push people away, but not in that aware stance, not in the aware place. And it's more of just reactionary. What we're talking about here is the ability to see what's happening as much as you can, and then to choose. Is this the right stance for this situation? And in doing so, then it helps us to move both towards that width, is what we're calling it, and towards the secure attachment. We're learning to recognize how both are working towards that goal. And so in some cases, you're going to say, I need to pull back. In some cases, you're going to say, wow, this is one in which I do need to have some boundaries. I need to say no. That's the against stance. So I'd like to hear from you you've already started talking about this. In what ways are you growing, Stephanie? Building on the heels of that, that's just an incredible moment of being able to step back. And I wonder, did that feel more like withness in the sense of like, yeah, I can be with you in your suffering. Boy, that's really hard. At the same time, like, it's not mine, right? That's like a real clarity around that. That brings out the best of the against stance, which is boundaried. And it's like, oh yeah, this isn't mine. This is yours. Distance, the proper distance, right? Which kind of has that away stance kind of thing. And recognizing like, yeah, I might need to pull back and I might need to pull away and be with myself a little bit. And so that's the idea there that I think is really, and toward as well. I mean, that's natural for you twos, but like, yeah, I can lean toward when it's necessary, and I can also pull back. So talk to me about your growth. What are you learning? How are you growing? And any stories that come to mind around that?
Well, for me, I think I already mentioned, but growing in the withdrawn stance, in the away, trying to be more intentional with that. And the word that I have been getting is yield, which it sounds interesting because people often think of twos as, well, twos are yielding, but there's a lot of areas, and maybe it's me being the sexual subtype as well, but I am stubborn. I struggle with yielding. I struggle with going away. And we talked about the word unsatisfying earlier. And when you said that, it made me think of that's sort of what I was thinking about, is yielding is hard in the moments where I'm seeking out that juice and I have a very clear picture in my mind of what is going to get me that. And if something conflicts with that, it's difficult for me to yield. And sometimes this feels like this isn't just for me. It's that concept of, but I'm also thinking that this is what is best for the other person as well. But I have been seeing that there is so much connection, which is what I'm ultimately seeking from yielding. And a really cool time when that happened was my mom and I were both leaving somewhere in separate cars, and she made a comment about if I waited 5 minutes for her, I could follow her. But it was literally just a straight road and then a turn. And internally I'm thinking, like, what's the point of that? But I felt sort of bad about just leaving. And so I waited. And then when she finished her thing and she saw me in the car and that I had waited, her face like lit up, and it meant so much to her. And I looked down and there was literally a rock that said yield. And I was like, wow, it didn't make sense to me. And I could have just been doing like that straight forced energy. Like you have that aggressive, you have that toward, all of that energy is a forward moving energy, which is great. But I've noticed that I miss moments because I don't stop that energy, or I end up not loving people well, which is what I'm wanting. But it was such a beautiful moment of connection. And so that's what I have been trying to lean into, is taking time to pause so that I can be with and choose my energy versus just moving forward blindly. Because ultimately I want that intimacy, and that happens when you yield and you pause.
Well, that's a beautiful story, beautiful description of the with stance. I love that. If I were to put under there like bullet points of different words, yieldedness would definitely be there. So thank you for sharing that. And I think of what my favorite spiritual teacher, Richard Rohr, says. That's the difference between willfulness and willingness. And I love that contrast. It's like, yeah, the willfulness is natural. The willingness that's the hard work and very unsatisfying as you're describing it in the moment. But
Right.
look what happens on the other side, right? Then it's like the strange effect of like, geez, I feel good. Like I feel so much better. And yeah.
Almost like two dual, but like congruent tracks over the last few years. And I give such credit to the Enneagram for, shaping me, having me understand myself, but actually almost more importantly, understanding those whom I love. So as I said, I live with 4 withdrawers. And so, as a social 2, I want to connect. And so that led to a lot of hurt. And so I think that I tried so much in my towards or at energy that it could make them go this way. And I think, Joel, when we had done this group coaching, you talked about when you understand something, you don't have to necessarily do any action as you observe, like Madeline talked about, it will naturally just fall away. Between a stimulus and response, there's a pause and you can make a choice. And for someone who's a very active 2, the ability to just observe myself and observe them has made all the other things going towards them too much fall away. And I don't know, just that insight has been really powerful. So I don't have to go at so much or towards. But then it's interesting, as I was thinking about this, almost for me, then the deeper work for me was the sense of not enough. The love that my family has for me and that we have for another is not enough, that like unsatisfying. And again, the Enneagram helped me with that. Like, yeah, that's that like yawning chasm that can never be filled. And so I was at this place once and I learned about the concept of wabi sabi, which is this like beauty and imperfection. And so can I be satisfied with this imperfect love of who my family is and how we love each other? And I really like sat with that for a while. I'm like, you know what? It's enough. And it's been traveling from here, down more to my heart. I'm also a woman of faith. And so for me, getting God in there and understanding that like only God can like really satisfy all that and everything else comes out of that has been really key. And so I think the lack of the expectation that I need my family to be a certain way, or I need them to express their love in a way that I want, that has been deeply satisfying. And so my sweet little self-pres 5, I'm a social 2 and I have a self-pres 5 son. So we're like this, learning to take his intellectual curiosity and things that he wants to share with me on that level as enough and as deeply connecting. And before I was like, but no, I want to go deep. And so that's been like such a gift to myself. And I think, and I believe that my family feels that shift in energy. And so we're like, we can enjoy who we are and what we are. And I don't have to envy somebody else's family. You know what I mean? So that's been a real gift of the Enneagram, I think.
Wow. I want to high five you, Madeline. I want to high five you. And I want to high five you, Stephanie and Dave. You guys, this is just so good. Thank you.
So one of the areas I'm learning to grow is in dealing with at or against kind of energy and people that come towards me like that. So I've recognized that if I equal that energy and bring the at right back at them, it doesn't end well because like I said before, I just can't control that energy to the point where I can have a normal conversation with somebody. And it goes into like blows, almost. So I've been contemplating like, what can I share? What should I share? Because I know that people will hear this and I don't want to upset anybody. So, so I have one Enneagram 8 in my life that we've been working closely together on a project. And I like working with my hands. I like in particular, like working with wood. Right now we're working on a trailer together, a mobile food trailer that'll go into the neighborhoods and we'll deliver meals. And so one of the things I love most is I disconnect and can just focus on the project and get it done. But as a result, I pour my heart and my soul into that project. And I do good work. I mean, it's hard to admit, but I do good work. And, after we use the trailer and then I somebody comes at me with a new list of things that need to be changed or fixed or done, I'm learning to just step back and take a breath and listen instead of responding. And that's been really hard because the adrenaline spikes and the like, you're coming at me, I'm going to come right back at you, and it's like, okay, this isn't the schoolyard. It's, I'm not defending myself. I don't need to defend myself. We're working together on a project. And so listening and waiting and hearing her out has been so beneficial. So like most of the time somebody comes at me, my response is no, you're not going to get that. You can try, you can ask all you want. The answer is going to be no, just because of their energy, which is not fair. And this person in particular has great ideas. And I'm finding that when I listen to her completely, those ideas are perfect. They're better than what I had in mind. Like it's far better. And so being able to listen and wait and not respond and like hold that adrenaline back, which has been so hard, I'm finding that the project has gone way better than if I had done it myself.
Which is interesting because as a social too, that is also part of your strength, is to bring people together. Yeah.
So, getting a punch list, now I look forward to it every couple Mondays. It's like, what's the new list? What am I going to fix or make better now? What are your ideas?
Yeah.
So it's come to a point where I'm looking forward to it and looking forward to the interaction. Whereas before, I'd either get aggressive or I'd withdraw and shut down. Like I can't deal with this energy. So I'm going to take off. See ya,
Yeah. Well, and I think to deepen what you're saying a little bit is that what that has to do with, it sounds to me like, is for you, the sense of agency is lost when you have an assertive or aggressive type that's coming in and you're not being seen in that space. And so that causes this reaction, right? And so having a bit more agency over your space, it's helpful because then you can look at, at what she's offering and not as like a loss of you again in the space, and you're not appreciated, you're not being seen for all that you have done before. Yeah.
And we've been talking about how, we have this stack and you all have had this similar stack, which is interesting, that yes, you'll go toward first and that needs are getting met. It can bring up anxiety, but that act can come second. And so I'm wondering if you've noticed this, because what you described reminded me of this when working with other people in relationships, couples, is that when you come in contact with an at and against person, you want to meet them in toward, but if they're at, you already feel like you're escalating to your next step.
I certainly do. Yeah. And that escalation, it's weird. It's like a rocket ship. Once it gets going, I can't control it.
I am the same, David. Something I heard you say without using the word curiosity was you started getting curious, right, about your colleague, the 8. And the thing that I've been kind of aching for in my romantic relationship was for us to be more curious about each other. And rather than immediately going to this kind of space of at and against in the moments of not understanding each other, getting curious versus going at each other, right? And I think, the same for me. The minute we start going at each other, it's like a competition. And who's going to get louder and who's going to get like more firm and who's going to dig their heels in harder and who, and obviously not healthy. And it's a space that's being worked on and that has been called out as like, this isn't good. This can't be good this is not sustainable. And this is not going to be something that makes us win. But because we've like ripped that Band-Aid off of saying that, it's like the dust settled and the curiosity has just started. And it's weird because, like I said, it's just like I'm getting hit over the head with it all in a week with 2 other people as well, where my natural instinct would be like recoil and just try to apologize and try to people please and or try to defend myself. I'm seeing, at least I saw last night in this other call where the other person was just coming straight at me hard. And I was able to just kind of stay, do, like you said, the width in the sense of like, I can see where you're at and I'm actually not going to meet you there. I'm actually able to just kind of hang here and see your pain and try to understand you. Like try to understand, like, what are your actual expectations here? I let you down, but I'm not clear on what you need from me. And you're not clear either. You can't even say it. You don't even know.
Look at that. That's power, right? That's agency right there when you describe. Yeah. And
just, I don't know, it gives me hope, I guess.
You're also able to separate out yourself from the other person, because again, the two can lose themselves.
Right.
There's an indistinguishability between you and the other person. And so it's all mixed in there. So how do you make sense of that? And it's like, it's my fault. It's your fault. It's my fault because I'm not good enough. It's your fault because you're not meeting my needs. It gets so tangled.
Right.
And you were able to, which is why you were having hard time putting words to this thing. It's because it's all brand new. It's like you can pull back and go, oh, wait, there's a lot that I don't have to manage because that's you. like
that's actually on you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow. Like that's your stuff. And not only do I not have to manage it, but now I have somewhat compassion, but a healthy kind of, it's a boundaried compassion. Like I'm over here, you're over there. I can have compassion, understanding. So
yeah. I've actually used a word picture in my head because I loved when you guys had done the podcast on the energies and the with. I just started thinking about it. Like, so as a 2, I often come towards, or I pull or push, trying to help them per se. And as I was thinking about it, I visualized myself with whoever it is, walking side by side. So we have our own space. And David, you had talked about inhabiting your own space. And so, we're free to go along our own path. And so for me, I can help if asked or if needed, but from my space and not impinging on theirs. And we're walking together and we both have wisdom and we both have knowledge. Their own agency is also really important. I don't have to always help them. Like they have their own wisdom. And so for me, like walking this parallel path instead of always intersecting, to me it is with energy. If I'm asked and if it's appropriate, I can do it. But that was always my default to like go in. And now I'm just like, let's parallel walk to with one another and respect one another that way.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. That is exactly what we wanted to clarify, because with did pop up because earlier I was like, I want to be with people. But when we're talking about with energy, that's what you just described. Yeah. It is parallel. It doesn't have the over ownership. It doesn't have the under boundaried or the over boundaried. It doesn't have the demand. It isn't trying to create that agenda. To be with is really going, what does this actually need right now? Mm-hmm. Where am I taking too much relational responsibility? Mm-hmm. And where do I actually need that withdrawal? Like
it's so hard as a 2.
Oh, I know. But Madeline said that, when she said, Madeline said that earlier, like, this is something I have to learn. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes. And all of us, like, regardless of every person, there's one that we have to go, okay, well, it's hard for me to not do that. Like, it's hard for me to not be at. Like, it's like, it's instantaneous. I'm not trying to be. It's just like, that's my nature. And it doesn't mean that there's anything, wrong in that moment. But it's just, that's, just the natural default setting. And so understanding, okay, this is where I naturally am. But how do I actually elevate above all of the instantaneous reactions? And so, Heather, the way you described that, I thought was just beautiful, because that's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about, like, how do we bring in more of this with energy, where we know this right here is the way to respond in this moment.
And none of us are natural at with whatever stance we are. Right. It's like, it is not natural at all. It doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. It's like the vulnerability for me as well. I'm in the against stance. So like moving. And I found that I've just had an epiphany in the last 2 weeks, probably because we're doing this, where I just saw it all over me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am doing this to Patty all the time. Like, there's always that resistance. No wonder she feels that. No wonder she has this like, PTSD from my constant resistance to her ideas. So I think the with for different types means a movement. It's a movement in some sense away from your starting point, but it's towards you at your best. Like, so I love that description, Heather, like that intersectionality that you described as like the natural, which feels like with to 2s, to that like parallel, which is like Jim was saying, boundaried. It recognizes I'm over here, you're over here, but we're not at a distance either. We're together And I think for all of us, it's like, this would be a good thing to chart the kind of even draw that out for ourselves. What does with look like for me? If my starting point is here, what characteristics, what habits do I need to develop in order to move more towards that with stance?
So good.
This has been amazing. And I just can't thank each of you enough for like your openness, your vulnerability, your wisdom, and the gift of you. So I think that's been a tremendous present gift to the world. Those of us who are doing this work, I mean, we can't do this alone. And so your voices and your stories are helpful to so many people out there. So thank you so very much to each of you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. You can follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletter at theartofgrowth.org. You can also go there to sign up for the community or to reach out to us for coaching. But hey, since you're here, why not stick around for another episode? Grace and growth, my friends.